Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at an Abzan colored elf deck, since it's been a while since we've last covered the elf tribe, and now with Battle for Zendikar we've got some additional reasons to play the white cards, and one of those white cards is Sunblade Elf. While not really a white card, of course, Sunblade Elf gets +1/+1 as long as we control a plains, and then for 4 and a white we can give all creatures +1/+1 until end of turn, which is a pretty sweet ability. Then we also get to play with a copy of Reprisal, which can deal with large creatures at instant speed for just 2 mana. And another new addition is Tajuru Stalwart, which is an elf and that for 3 mana can become up to a 3/4 thanks to Converge, which is a nice deal. And then another reason to play the white is that we get to play with a Shambling Vent, which can turn into a creature and start attacking. So those are all the white cards, but of course let's take a look at the entire deck here, starting with Thornbow Archer, a 1/2 for 1 black, and then whenever the Thornbow Archer attacks, each opponent loses 1 life unless they control an elf, so basically attacks for 2 damage. And then the Thornbow Archer plus the copies of Sunblade Elf gives us access to a total of 7 1-drops, which makes our next card a lot better, which is Dwynen's Elite, a 2/2, but when we control another elf when the Dwynen's Elite enters a battlefield, we get an additional 1/1 green elf warrior creature token, so we get a total of 3 power and 3 toughness across 2 bodies for just 2 mana, which is great. Another great card is Elvish Visionary, 1/1 elf for 2 mana that draws us a card, so enables our elf synergies while still drawing us a card, so we're not down on any cards. We've got 1 copy of Shadows of the Past, since we are a heavy creature deck, so whenever a creature dies we get to scry 1 to look for more action, and then later in the game for 4 and a black we can drain the opponent for 2, but we can only use this if we have 4 or more creatures in the graveyard, which shouldn't be a problem since most of the time we will be using this after maybe the opponent has wiped our board, so we'll have lots of elves in the graveyard, so we can use this as our win condition. We've already discussed the Reprisal. Also have 1 copy of Reave Soul for the early game to remove problematic creatures. A copy of Liliana, which is the only non-elf that I include in the deck, simply because she does go well with a heavy creature deck, since our creatures are prone to dying, which makes once we have emptied our hand, and then the minus can also bring back some of our sweet elves with enter the battlefield abilities. So Liliana is decent in the deck. Then 1 copy of Nissa, which is also an elf, and of course we all know Nissa by now, great planeswalker, can give us a lot of card advantage and also win the game at some point. Then the full amount of Jagged-Scar Archers, which is also great, scales with the number of elves we control and can take down flyers. Then we've already looked at the Tajuru Stalwart. Of course, Shaman of the pack, still one of the best elves in the deck, as it can drain the opponent for a lot of damage, and then still be a 3/2 for 3 mana, which is not bad. And we also have the 2 copies of Dwynen, Gilt-Leaf Daen still, so a 3/4 reach, all elves get +1/+1, so a lord, and then when she attacks we also get to gain a bunch of life. And the card we have scaled back a bit on is the Lys Alana Huntmaster, so only 2 copies instead